have not ever met you before, I want to say welcome to Liberty Hill Church.
Amen.
And we hope that you'll continue to come back.
Yes.
We love having you with us. You know, this is a strange time to live in. It seems like we're in a renewed and refreshed dark age within the American experience. I'll tell you that not only in the American experience, it seems that across the globe we're feeling these dark ebbs and flows as they come. As the leaders of a whole bunch of countries, Sister Green, have become self-centered and self-serving, and they produce agendas that move toward their good and not the good and care of people. Not only have we gotten to a place where the leaders seem corrupt, but we can see the direct correlation, Brother Danny Fisher, because we realize that the disparities of the poor have greatly increased over the past decade. We think about poor people are getting poorer, and the rich are getting richer. And you know, human rights, and when I say human rights, I don't want to offend anyone, because I realize we all have our different things that we do, but when I say human rights, nowadays it seems that human rights have become the focus. Human rights seem to have become so focused that it sidetracks us and causes us to fall into the quicksand of public opinion, and we call it civil rights. You see, a civil right is one, just as it sounds, that is given by the government. It's not necessarily a natural right or a moral right. See, we've got to realize that the moral obligation should summon us to basic human rights that are fundamentally principled toward our conscience. Now, what do I mean by that? It's one thing to say that a person has rights based on their sexual orientation. It's another thing to say that a person has rights based on their gender. It's another thing to say that a person has rights based on their race, and the list goes on. When it is a civil right, it is because the government has decided that this particular group ought to be protected under the law. Hear me now. But it doesn't necessarily mean that human rights are protected. Oh, I wish I had somebody. I wish that somehow we could have some civil rights for poor people. I wish we could have some civil rights for the homeless. I wish we had civil rights for the hungry. You see, we talk about civil rights, these elected kind of laws that seem to somehow take precedence over our humanity. But we should realize that it is important for us to think about those who are disfranchised. Human and moral rights should remain elevated above politically derived civil rights. And don't get me wrong, rights are good, but without love, no right is good. See, love has to be at the foundation of what we do, what we think, and how we operate with regards to each other. But you know, we're in an age that we're gripped by ethical deficiency. We're ethically deficient. We are morally deficient. Delinquencies against humanity have begun to emerge, and it damages us everything from human trafficking to mass rape and genocide. The horror of murder, and I do say murder through abject poverty. I know that most of the time when we look at the news, we think of murder as happening with a bullet or a knife, or someone has to be struck. Unfortunately, poverty kills people to their death. It is a slow, horrible death that is energized by a lack of nutrition in many communities, suboptimal health care, underemployment, undereducation, and systematic violence perpetuated by sinisterly calculated government principles and policies. See, when you talk about black-on-black crime, you ought to ask the question, why? Because somebody is pulling the puppet strings behind the scenes. So we've got to be careful to think about these issues and realize that the world is in an uproar. But Wesley, I tell you, Liberty Hill, the world seems to be in a mess right now. To make matters worse, it seems that one of the most dominant servant leader positions amidst world leaders is currently occupied by a lying, self-aggrandizing, egotistical, arrogant, mischievous, morally bankrupt, racist, womanizing, misogynistic, inadequate sex predator. America is in trouble. We need to sound an alarm. America is in trouble. And the sad part about it is people are walking around like everything is normal. This mess is crazy. A man who says that they grab women by their privates, we elected anyway. And now we've got all of these ads on TV. Elect me, I'm a Christian. Which oftentimes is code word for KKK. Our government seems to be making funeral arrangements for black and brown people. Most specifically blacks and Mexicans. Building walls so families can't be together. While starving and hurting other people. We need to sound an alarm. I would ask the question not about the politicians, because I care less about the politicians. My work is not a political one. I'm not a politician, don't want to be one. My work is here in the church, and Sister Turner, the question I ask is, where are the Christians? Where is the church? Where are the believers? And someone says we'll cut government assistance for those who are hungry. When someone says we'll cut their benefits because they're old, they don't need as much health care as they used to. I want to know, where are the Christians? Where is the church? Sound the alarm. Something is wrong. But unfortunately, we have so many imposter churches and imposter Christians that call themselves evangelical and left-right. They're representing us while supporting evil and anarchy fueled by devilish intentions. Internationally, you've got chemical warfare, atomic weapons of critical destruction on the rise of use, either out of circumstantial concrete catastrophe or either out of corporative conspiracies of lies. They continue to rise across the world. The world is in an uproar. I'll say to you this morning, Liberty Hill, we need to overcome the world and the demonic trappings that are set and directed against us. So the question is, what do you do when the world gets crazy? What do you do, Sister Magwood, to overcome this mundane madness? Fortunately, it seems that 1 John offers us a solution for this season. In this final faith chapter, we are challenged to realize that we have an opportunity to live in this world but not be of this world. We can be here, but we don't have to think like them. We don't have to act like them. We can think on the level that God has left for us through the example of Jesus Christ with the power of the Holy Spirit. Look at John chapter 5, verse 3, you'll find these words. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. We need to keep the commandments in order to overcome the world. Christ provides the great commandment in Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40. Liberty Hill, you ought to know that somebody asked one day, said, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus answered like this, Sister Brittany Marshall. He said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophecy. If you are a guest here in our church today, most of the members of this church already know this. If you're a guest in our church today, if you don't remember anything else about this sermon, please remember this passage. Because I hear a lot of people say, you know, you shouldn't use profanity, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But this is what Jesus said we must do. And unfortunately, there are a whole lot of folk who don't use profanity